Hi, I'm Gareth Green, and in this video we're going to have a look at some of a piece written by the composer Clara Schumann. Let's have a listen to the opening of this piece. And so it goes on. It's a rather beautiful piece, isn't it? And Clara Schumann, was she significant? Was she not significant? Well, actually, I'm going to go with significant. She's often overshadowed by her husband, Robert Schumann, very famous composer of piano music as well as many other things. And actually, Clara was a great advocate of Robert Schumann's music. So one of her important roles, one of her significances, is her promotion of her husband's music and her continuation of that work after her husband had died. She's also very interesting because she was very closely connected with Brahms and had a great influence on Brahms. So she's significant not just as a composer, but in the role that she played in some little corner there, a quite significant corner of romantic music. But to be a woman and to be successful as a composer at that time was a real challenge. It was a male-dominated world. Sad though that is, it's true. So as a woman, you had to be something quite remarkable to succeed. And what I want to focus on here is to acknowledge her significance in the way that we've already mentioned, but actually to say, let's just think about her music for its own sake and think, how significant was she as a composer in her own right? And I think she was quite remarkable. I mean, this piece is a fascinating example of what I believe to be the real strengths of Clara Schumann's style. On the one hand, she has a lovely lyrical approach to the writing of melody. And on the other hand, she has this kind of romantic passion that comes particularly through her use of harmony and tonality, but also through her use of texture. So let's see if we can unpack those elements in a few bars of this piece. So she starts off with this beautiful little melodic idea. Now, I think that's rather gorgeous because it sort of comes from nowhere. It doesn't have a very definite start, does it? It just comes in and then turns into something. And that's a fairly short idea. She then develops it a little bit further, takes it higher, uses a triplet, and it ends with these two crotchets, these two quarter notes, but following the same pattern. So you notice this was just taking a step down here, and it just takes a step down there. See how this triplet is an evolution over the previous quavers or eighth notes. Then what does she do? Well, from here, she goes on and does this with a little ornament, little acciaccatura. And then settles on that C and then goes on there and then takes the triplet again. Ti-da-da, ti-dum. And you can hear how that triplet drives the melodic thing. Ta-da-da, ti-dum. It's a gorgeous way of using the rhythm to highlight the lyricism of the phrase. Then she kind of uses that rhythm again. And then a bit of syncopation that goes in here, which makes an interesting end to the end of the phrase. And then she writes out this turn and finishes in the dominant at that point. So it's a lovely bit of lyrical writing that's made up of kind of fairly short statements. They're not quite short motifs, but they are quite motivic in nature. And to hear how she balances one of these short statements against the next, and to hear how an initial idea evolves, really gives you an idea about how gifted she was as a writer of lyrical melodies. Just listen to that melodic line and let's stitch it together. skillfully crafted, isn't it? You know how sometimes when a composer writes with these kind of short ideas, you have some sense of we've started, we've stopped, we've started, we've stopped, we've started, we've stopped. And it's kind of like, it's a bit tedious fairly quickly. She has this ability to do the kind of start and stop without giving us that sense of it kind of doing that and bumping the music. We're kind of left in the air at the end of one short phrase, wondering where she's going to take it in the next phrase, wondering how she develops it, either by introducing a triplet or introducing an acciaccatura, or at the end introducing a turn figure. In other words, using rhythm, using syncopation in this bar here. So it's very skillfully organized rhythmically to enhance what she's doing melodically in terms of generating this lyricism. But it's only one side of her musical personality. Let's have a look at what's happening harmonically. Well, at the beginning, well, we're in F major. She doesn't make any apology for starting with a chord of F major. All these notes belong to the tonic chord. The E is either the seventh or it's functioning as a kind of appoggiatura feel onto the F. Then she does this. So the A is definitely an appoggiatura onto this chord. So what's this chord? It's a 2-7, G, B flat, D, F, in its last inversion. So she keeps the F in the bass because she's using a pedal point in the bass. You see how this F is there? And then she moves it on by going down the scale. And then she kind of leaps up the octave and continues going down the scale all the way to the cadence. So the bass line has something interesting, even though it's a pedal point and then this huge descending scale, it has a kind of melodic significance because of that. And it has this sense of kind of deepening the texture as we build to this cadence in the dominant at this point on the second line. But then you've got this harmony. So we've got chord 1. Then we've got 2-7 in its last inversion, which is already ramping up a little bit of intensity. The F sharp is a chromatic lower auxiliary note. And then she comes on to here. Well, the F pedal point is still there. And this is a 5-7 in F. And then it resolves back to 1 again. And then she uses chord 5 in first inversion. A little bit of decoration about this chord 4 in first inversion. Then she comes to chord 3 in first inversion. So you notice how we're kind of climbing down these first inversions. 5 in first inversion, 4 in first inversion, 3 in first inversion. Then she goes on to 2 in first inversion, then 1 in first inversion. So you've got the descending bass line, but she's using all these first inversion chords. So far, nothing over radical. Then she gets into the syncopated bar. We get 5-7 in second inversion, 1, 5 in first inversion, which is kind of pivoting. So we're going to the C major through this 7 in first inversion, then a kind of triple appoggiatura, but using a diminished 7th in C major to get me to a C major chord. So there's a real colour there, isn't there? With the C and then the diminished 7th above it. We have the greatest point of harmonic tension so far there, pushing us to the dominant key. Then she relaxes that tension again and says, yeah, okay, well, let's just go back to F. So 3 chords taking us back to F, and then F major, chord 1. And then we're going to go round this territory again, which is as it was at the beginning. The triplet thing again, the dominant 7th over the tonic pedal. Oh, notice we've now got a triplet replacing that ornament, so a little bit different there. And then she kind of comes back to this chord 1, but then she goes somewhere else. And so we have a real kind of opening up of sound with this crescendo, and she plunges into the dominant chord of A minor. So that's interesting, the median minor key. And you see how she uses this to pivot the F major thing, because that is chord 6 in A minor as well as chord 1 in F. Chord 5 in A minor, you can really feel that opening up. And and then you wonder where it's going, but she stays there. She's quite insistent. So it has a kind of intensity because it's repeated. There's an insistence. Then she goes somewhere else. She goes to the relative major of A minor to C major, and we have this kind of real kind of switching on of the light, going from minor to major, and then she kind of calms down with this 513, lovely beautiful chord, going to a perfect cadence in C major, the dominant key, and things really calm down at that point. So you think, okay, well, she likes to have a pedal point, she likes to have a little bit of harmonic intensity, the odd seventh, you know, the odd little modulation somewhere predictable, but then she calms down again, comes back home, which is quite pleasant. But then she shows us that she's made of a bit more grit, because what happens next? We're using some of these ideas, the triplet, and now we're going to this chord, oh gorgeous chord, 2-7 in G minor. And then we're called 5-7 in G minor. Then we've opened up the texture. You notice how the right hand has gone up. There are more notes in the chords, a bit thicker. And then she comes down with this sort of doubling between the hands there through the dominant chord or the dominant ninth in G minor. And then G minor. It's chord 2 in the original F major, but it's chord 1 in G minor. C sharp's a chromatic note. There's a tritone above the G. So that has another intensity, but it's still the G minor, the bass going down, this idea of the descending scale she loves in the bass. But we're not staying in the key, so we get there. We've now got a 2-7 in D minor, which she reinforces at a higher octave, thicker chords again. Then a dominant ninth in D minor, and then she comes to the tonic chord of D minor. Now things are quite powerful. Then we get a B flat major chord. Okay, so in D minor, that's a kind of chord 6 in first inversion. And then we've got a diminished 7th in D minor, but then we've got a diminished 7th in G. Then she goes for a B natural, the bass has gone chromatic now. Notice D, C sharp, C natural, B flat, A. So she's got to the B. So that's G major, but no G minor. And then the dominant 7th in D, followed immediately by a dominant 7th back in G minor. Here she is in G minor. Then she goes E flat major. You're thinking, oh my goodness, what's going on here? And then look at this colour. Oh, isn't it gorgeous? The diminished 7th there, kind of going E flat now. So we're really getting adventurous. Then we go to E flat, and then we've got another diminished 7th. So you see what's happening. Things are really hotting up now, aren't they? And suddenly the world is becoming really intense harmonically, really passionate. So here's my case through one page of Clara Schumann. Is she significant, or is she just, you know, Robert Schumann's wife, or a friend of Brahms, or someone who could knock up a nice tune but was a bit kind of, you know, third tier? I think she's an absolutely frontline composer in her own right. Why? Because look at how she can write this lyrical line and take short ideas and develop them. Look at the way she can develop her harmonic intensity, almost kind of lead you up the garden path by saying, it's something fairly straightforward, it's kind of dominant chords, tonic chords, nothing exciting, but something interesting rhythmically to get us going. But as this page unfolds, when you get to the second half of this page, you think, wow, where is this woman going next? And the music is absolutely riveting, kind of high drama, high passion, romantic music. So there's a case for Clara Schumann in one page of music that I hope gets you excited about her music and gets you wanting to go and explore more of the music of Clara Schumann. Well, if you've enjoyed this video and this is kind of kindling an interest in kind of musical analysis, not as a boring academic thing, but as a way of getting an insight into a composer and what they're about, we've got some analysis videos on the Music Matters website, www.mmcourses.co.uk. Click on courses, have a scroll down, and you'll see some analysis videos. So for example, we've got a Bach Prelude and Fugue in F sharp minor from book 1 of the World Temper Clavier. That's really unpacking how that prelude works, how the fugue works. If you want to learn about fugue, that's a very useful way of getting into that. We've got another analysis course that is taking the Beethoven Pathetique Sonata, all the movements, going through each movement, every bar, every measure of the movement, explaining exactly what's going on, what Beethoven's thinking. So if you're wanting to get into this kind of how do I get inside the mind of a composer, those videos would be incredibly helpful ways of doing it. Anyway, hope you've enjoyed Clara Schumann. www.mmcourses.co.uk